Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's another edition of the In the Clutch podcast. I'm your host tonight, Jonathan Michael. Alongside me is my co-host Gavin Russell, Joey Wright, and John Komosa, all joining me here. Guys, how's you guys' day been? It's been a busy day of high school sports, getting in the thick of things with high school football.
Yeah, John, I'll kick it off. It's that time of year, right? Everything is in full swing. It's a fun time of year, a busy time of year. Of course, full time I'm over at the News Gazette in Champaign, so keeping an eye on a lot of those teams. Getting ready for Urbana and Champaign Central is going to be our Light Rock 97.5 high school football game of the week this week. But certainly all we do with Clutch, keeping an eye on those teams and man, Normal Community, Peoria, Morton, the like. So many strong teams to choose from that are really looking good here as we approach the midway part of the year.
Yeah, it's been fun so far. Hard to believe we're already in the halfway point of the season, and we've seen already some great performances. We've seen some teams really take off. Maybe a few teams that haven't quite lived up to the expectations, but we've had the warm weather, not quite that football weather yet, and I must say I'm enjoying it. I do appreciate the warm temperatures sticking around for a little longer, but it's been a lot of fun and looking forward to week 5.
The middle line I certainly has been impressive right now. We have three teams that really stand out: Morton, Dunlap, and Washington. Big 12, Normal Community kind of seems to be that team that's going to run away with it right now. But we could see some teams that try to make some a little bit of noise there, John. But right now, Normal Community seems to be that team.
Yeah, definitely. They had a big win over Peoria High, which we'll get into here briefly. But Gavin, I know you said it's not quite football weather yet. As we record this, this is on Tuesday night. I just got back from the Normal West and Peoria Notre Dame soccer game. I can tell you it was perfect outside. It was warm enough where didn't need a jacket, but not cold enough to where you weren't freezing. Yeah, so and I was out there right around 7:30, 8 o'clock, usually when most games are kicking off in the first half, stuff like that. So now we're really kind of hitting the sweet spot of the season, as I like to call it. The action gets a little bit more intense. Games, they have more stakes to them and everything. And everything about it just is better. Mid-September is one of my favorite times of the year. But going back to our games that we were at last week, guys, we were at Normal Community and Peoria High. What a fantastic game. Really fun to watch between two high-powered offenses. And then Washington flexing their muscles in another shutout win over Pekin. Gavin, we'll start with you. You were at Washington and Pekin. What'd you see from that game?
Yeah, that was a game where, Pekin had an opportunity. I kind of said on the broadcast that if you gave Pekin the opportunity, they may take it. And Washington kind of just needed to handle business, which they ultimately ended up doing. Although Daryl Crouch probably is going to look at the film, going to look how the course of that game went, and kind of decipher a few things. We need to clean up the penalties. We need to clean up some of that unnecessary stuff. If you do that in a playoff game, you're very easily going to get beat. So Pekin didn't really take advantage of that and miss some opportunities there. Ultimately, Washington took care of business, but again, I think Daryl Crouch would tell you they got to be better for 4 quarters, not figured out in the second half. They got to be complete start to finish. Aside from that, though, some great performances. Kenan McQuarrie continuing to have success, finding the end zone a hat trick of times, 3 touchdowns from McQuarrie. But player of the game, Jace Harlan, was getting it done both ways, had a touchdown offensively, got some big runs, but also came up with a number of key tackles for a stifling Washington defense that shut out Pekin for a second straight week.
I was gonna say, Gavin, that Washington defense has been really strong so far this year. Washington will have some easier games coming up, but then they get Dunlap in week 7, they get Morton in week 9. So those are definitely some games to watch. But I mean, Washington again, I think we really kind of knew how good their defense was after they held the Kankakee K's, one of the best offenses in the state, to just
Yeah.
7 points. So that defense is really going to be the key for Washington. A lot of attention, a lot of the spotlight is going to be on Kenan McQuarrie, and for good reason. I'd say he's one of the best running backs, one of the best all around players I think in the area. But it's that 11-man unit on defense that's just been so hard for
Mm-hmm.
opponents to figure out. I'll just go real quick. I was at Normal Community in Peoria High. Man, what a game! just for both offenses. Didn't see a ton of defense from either side. I think if Peoria High, if they just could have gotten just one or two stops, they could have been in that game for probably a little bit longer. But I mean, the Ironmen were almost scoring at will. I don't even know if they even punted the entire game. Quite honestly, they may have once or twice, but if so, I honestly didn't remember it. Kyle Beatty looked absolutely phenomenal. He's so mature, so professional in the pocket, knows where he's going with his reads. Delivered some great balls to Marquand Gary and Ivorian Austin. And they got that great backfield duo of Tommy Davis and Kalen Taylor, who are both not only fast, but also hard to bring down as well. He had a pick six from Dexter Niekamp. Just happened to be in the right spot at the right time. Peoria High, they were without Tino Gist. That was the main surprise of that game. It took all of us in the booth by surprise. We expected him to play. Found out that he wasn't playing. Got taken out because of so I think some disciplinary reasons. Regardless, and that aside, Breon Green, the sophomore, came in and did a really good job for Peoria High, just keeping them in the ball game. Doesn't have quite the same arm as Tino Gist, but he's a little bit younger, has room to grow, and he really just kind of led the offense well. Malik Ross had a nice game, and kind of carried the Lions offensively. But really good game from both teams. Community, they got through the gauntlet. They're the three toughest games in SHG, Normal West, and now Peoria High. Now they get 5 games in, which I think they should be able to win, and they may very well be going into the playoffs at 9-0. So that's what I have to say about that game. Joko, you were at Metamora and Morton, which we didn't broadcast, but Potters looks dominant again, 45-19.
Yeah, so what I saw out of that game early on was Metamora, or I should say Morton's defense was very dominant. Morton through the air, Jude Hart to JP Krusek, they had 2 touchdowns. They led 17-6 at halftime. We thought we would see a battle back and forth between these two teams. And I'm thinking to myself, this could be one of those Mid-Atlantic Conference matchups that, could come down to the wire. Morton going for their, undefeated season on the line under Adam O'Neill, first-year head coach. But, John, once they had that commanding lead at halftime, it did not slow them down. Cue the running game. Shondon Buffington, unbelievable second half. So I thought Morton was going to continue with the air attack. No, they switched it up completely. Buffington had 37 carries for 283 yards, 3 touchdowns. He has never won against Metamora in his entire career. He got that big win on Friday night, and that helped Morton get to 4-0. And the Potters look very dominant. They had jack-o'-lantern themed helmets on their silver helmets. I mean, John, let me tell you right now, Morton looks like a team that could potentially make a deep run in the playoffs. And I would not be surprised if they go undefeated in the middle line. I know they have a very tough slate coming up. Washington's going to be a big test. Dunlap's going to be a big test, but this defense, their front line, their secondary, they make some big plays. Wide receiver GP Krusek, quarterback Jude Hart, Buffington, Brett Michael. They have a lot of talent on this team, a big senior-laden team, and Adam O'Neill is doing a really, really good job at the Potters right now. Obviously, throw in the mix with Daryl Crouch, but right now, Morton's looking like that team to beat.
Yeah, Potters are certainly looking good. Joey, I know you weren't at any of our local games, but as we kind of may transition into our next segment, we'll lead off with you. I know, were any games around the area this past week that caught your eye, that were any eye-opening games, whether it be an upset or just a big win for anybody? Just what do you think of this last week for Peoria High School football?
Sure, John, and it doesn't deal directly with Peoria High School football, but it's more a team that Peoria and Normal Community are very lucky they won't see this year, and that's Centennial here in Champaign. I was out at their big rivalry game against Champaign Central on Friday night, and Chargers have it rolling. Kyle Jackson's done a great job with that team. Quarterback Kellen Davis has them off to a hot 4-0 start. they've got ambitions of going 9-0, and in the Big 12 Conference, they won't face Normal Community or Peoria, which is an incredible stroke of luck. We've got our eye on that Normal West game, Week 9. That could have some Big 12 implications. I think the Chargers have a great chance at being 8-0 when that game approaches. They've got some work to do. They played Manual and Richwoods in back-to-back weeks 2 and 3, and I think they would have liked to have won a little bigger, but a win's a win. They're looking good. Their other win against Urbana in Week 1, looking good as the middle part of the season approaches. So keep an eye on the Chargers. And then the other game that caught my eye in our area, also dealing with a Champaign area team over here, but Bloomington Central Catholic. The Saints looking really good out of the gates. A good win over Monticello, edge of the Sages on Friday night. You always know when you face Monticello, Cully Welter's going to have those boys ready to play, but the Saints going to have a test against Unity this week over in Tolono. I don't know if that game's in Tolono or Bloomington, but it's going to be a good test against, I believe it's in Bloomington. Gotcha. It's going to be a good test against a Scott Hamilton team that's got a great group of sophomores. Dan Eisenmenger at quarterback. Keep an eye on that because it's a matchup of 4-0 and 3-1, and I think that's going to really show us a lot about the Illini Prairie Conference race here as it moves along. And other than that, I can tell you a lot about Champaign area football, not as much about the Peoria scene, but looking good. I tell you one team that's still in the News Gazette's coverage area. We don't do a lot of them with Clutch, but Leroy looking good, yes. 4-0. The Panthers have 7 home games this year in the Heart of Illinois Conference. Of course, they'll face a lot of the teams in our area. So keep an eye on those Panthers, one of the smallest 11-man football playing schools in our area, but still a well-coached team. BJ Zalesnik's got that team playing good football, and not a team you're going to want to see in the Heart of Illinois this year by any means.
No, definitely not. And, Joey, that's the advantage we have of, having you down in Champaign because, we got our guys in Peoria, we have, guys in Bloomington, and we also have guys in Champaign. So, we got, we have moles everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Joey Wright is our mole in Champaign-Urbana to keep track of our area teams, when they go down, whether it be Illini Prairie, Big 12, anybody that's down Joey's direction, he's going to know about it, and he's going to give us a weird insight about that. So, real quick, guys, we'll kind of whip around, last week's action, some, scores, anything that stands out real quick. Start with the Mid-Illini, obviously Washington over Pekin. Dunlap, 41-6 win over Limestone. Really not much to say about that one, at least in my opinion. They had a running clock second half. Dunlap did what Dunlap needed to do. Morton, obviously, over Metamora. We talked about that. East Peoria, another win for them. 2 straight seasons of at least 2 wins, and they have a 25-20 win over Canton. So, again, baby steps for the Raiders, but, Justin Jefferson has them going in the right direction now. I mean, like I said, 2 straight wins or 2 straight seasons of 2 straight wins, certainly a sign of progress.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and talk for the entire podcast about East Peoria because a lot of people are going to sit here and listen and be like, well, East Peoria, they're not really in the mix. Not yet, at least. Right now, this is the time for East Peoria to keep building. I see Joey laughing, and for good reason. No, I'm just kidding. No, but East Peoria, just starting to build it back together, and that's something that's not easily done. Taking now in this day and age of high school football, where you got to get kids that want to come out. You got to be a motivator. That's something that's been very challenging, and I think Dustin Jefferson is starting to accomplish well. They're getting more starters. They're starting to figure out the depth of this team. And overall, you can see the signs of progress, taking a team that barely fielded a varsity roster 2 or 3 seasons ago to back-to-back seasons with a couple wins and their first win over Canton since 2018. So, again, it's not it's not completely done yet, but give it 2 or 3 more years, and this is going to be a fairly competitive team in the Mid-Illini with maybe some potential upside, which honestly, if East Peoria is good at football, I think it's just going to make everybody better. We're going to have better seasons. We're going to have a better schedule. We're not going to have all these easy games. It's going to just make for better football. So if you're a neutral fan or even a Mid-Illini fan, I think you'd want to see East Peoria just be successful, and just try to make the conference better.
Yeah, certainly, Gavin. I definitely agree with you there. And always better when there's, more competitive balance. I know, right down the Mid-Illini, at least for the last couple of years, at least almost entirely since I've been in the Peoria area, it's been, kind of, the 5 teams, Pekin, Morton, Metamora, Dunlap, Washington, they've all been good. And then it's, been Canton, Limestone, East Peoria at the bottom. And, at least from where I can remember, the only time I remember that one of those 3 teams beating one of that group of 5 teams was when Canton beat Metamora to end, I believe it was the 2021 season. So if we can have more games like like that, it'll just make things a lot more interesting. So major props to what they're doing over in East Peoria. Kind of moving quick over to the Big 12. Joko, we'll see what kind of your thoughts are for some of these games. Normal West, big win over Urbana, 65-14. However, they only led 28-14 at halftime. Normal West is playing with sophomore quarterback Drew Mangrum after their starter Johnny Fryman, who was having an incredible year. He got hurt, so hopefully he can come back and everything. But Wildcats are rolling with Drew Mangrum for now. Also elsewhere in the Big 12, P&D. I don't know how Pat Armstrong does it, but he keeps on winning with the wing T in the Big 12. P&D 42-7 over Richwoods. Irish move up to 3-1. Bloomington, a big win over Danville, 31-14. Joey, that one. I think you picked Danville in that game. So still a good Vikings team. Big win for Bloomington. Manuel fell to Lincoln, 48-12. So Joko, any thoughts about the Big 12 this past week?
Yeah, so just kind of off your point, John, leading into this week with the Big 12, P&D, they have a tough game against Jacksonville. They have a really good strong core at the running back position with Jack Hanley. This kid's a workhorse. I mean, he literally puts a team on his back. He says, anything I can do to win. I mean, he said that at the start of the season. P&D is a team that can really go out and show it. Peoria High as well. I think they're going to bounce back after this Normal Community loss. Manuel's a team that can kind of pick things up, and kind of going back to Gavin's point in the Mid-Illini, some of these teams are rebuilding. They're kind of finding their identity, and I think that kind of translates to the Big 12 as well. But right now, John, to your point, I think right now in the middle, or I should say in the Big 12, Normal Community, Normal West kind of seem like the top dog. Champaign Centennial, P&D, honestly, if they get a win this Friday, they could be in the mix in the top there. And I think we see some teams that really surprise some people. Richwoods, they could sneak out a win against Normal West. I think this is a young team. They're still trying to kind of find their identity. But right now, Big 12's kind of up for grabs, John. It really is. Outside of those two top teams with Peoria High and Normal Community, I think Bloomington, P&D, Normal West, they're all trying to show their identity. And honestly, I would be surprised if there's a couple upsets here this next week.
John, you didn't even mention Centennial in there. They're 4-0.
I said Centennial.
Did you say Centennial? Oh,
I
man.
did say Centennial. I said Centennial 4-0.
There you go. Well, hey, real quick on the rebuilding point. I mean, Centennial's got to be the blueprint for any team looking to rebuild. 2019, right before the pandemic, Chargers go 0-9. Didn't look competitive in hardly any of those games. They played some close ones to maybe some of the lesser teams in the conference that year. Tough loss. I know Kyle Jackson always hates it when I bring it up, but you got to go back to that 96-14 loss to Peoria in week 1 that year, and things seemed dim, right? There wasn't a lot of hope, but the Chargers have really turned it around, and I think that that loss, you look at that night, late August 2019, is almost a compliment. Now it's a sign of how far you can turn a program around in 4 years in a tough conference. So I think that's hope for East Peoria. That's hope for the likes of Urbana in that conference right now, just getting their feet wet, playing varsity football again this season for the first time in a little bit. And really, it can be tough. I mean, it can be a long process, but if you put the good people in place like Centennial has done with Kyle Jackson and a great coaching staff, it can come maybe quicker than people think.
Yeah, certainly. And I was gonna say, if Centennial can go 0-9 and turn it around, I was just about to say, Joey, there's hope for your Urbana Tigers. But anyway, real quick, we'll kind of wrap things up with small selection from last week. If any of you want to chime in, if you have any takeaways, Tri-Valley staying undefeated, a big win over Fieldcrest, 55-12. We mentioned BCC, that win over Monticello. El Paso Gridley steamrolled Elmwood Brimfield 45-6 in a game that, at least I thought, it was probably going to be a little bit closer than that. Hayworth, another HOI small division team, beating an HOI large division team, 42-14 over DMAC. We also had SJO took down IVC. I'm looking at And another, again, HOI small school taking an HOI large school. Gibson City Melvin Sibley beat Eureka 34-14. So we'll get into more into Eureka and DMAC later. That's going to be our CSM game of the week. Both those teams are going to be looking for bounce backs. Tremont also lost to a HOI small school team in Leroy. Again, as Joey alluded to, very strong this year. One of the, I think most impressive wins, Olympia over Williamsville, school kind of on the edge of our coverage area, but added them this year. The Spartans look really good. And also Normal U High, the huge win 28-14 over MacArthur. So I think the Pioneers I think this might be their year to get back in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of had my eye on that Williamsville Olympia game. The bullets couldn't pierce the Spartans' armor in that one, but it was a close one. It was a 27-20 affair, and I think that Olympia has got the right parts in place. We looked at them in our preview, and go check that out and see some overtime, but they definitely have some really promising players, and Williamsville is not a slouch when it comes to really any sport, both football and as well as basketball. They always are very competitive school in some of the lower classes. So that's definitely a big one right there. But I do agree that the EPG Elmwood Brimfield game was certainly far from what I expected it to be. And I got to say, my takeaway from small school overall this past week was a lot of high scoring action. Not that small schools can't score in football games, but traditionally, you don't see teams scoring 55, 45, 49, 42 across the board. A lot of high scoring action for some small schools. So small schools, but not small in terms of action.
Yeah, certainly, Gavin. And, real quick, on that point, how about Rova, Williamsfield, and Princeville? The Princes couldn't quite get it done. They lost 55-40, but how about this? They didn't play that game with their star quarterback, Logan Carruthers, and they played most of it without star running back Tayshawn Keyser. And their backups, put up some huge numbers. So,
I'm big on the Princes. I'm a Princes backer.
Well. Yeah, I am as well. I think it's going to be a team to watch, and we'll see how they overcome the injuries, but certainly not slowing their offense down. But guys, it kind of wraps up looking back at last week. We're kind of in the middle of the season now. We're actually, I think, smack dab in the middle of the season. We're right in the middle of the week between week 4 and week 5. Can't get much more in the middle than this. So, guys, we have some midseason superlatives real quick. Gonna ask you guys some midseason superlatives. You guys give your answers with no more than a brief explanation. We'll start first. Most impressive team. When you guys can go first.
I think the most impressive team right now in the Mid-Illini would be Washington. Their defense has been superb. Their offensive game has been superb. The front line with Keenan McQuarrie, but don't count out Morton right now. I think this is going to be raced between those two teams. Quickly, John, flip over to small school. I think Eureka is going to make a big bounce back. I think they could potentially win out if they get a win over DMAC. Those are my 2 points.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was going to say Morton as well. Morton has probably been the most impressive team, especially where we maybe considered them to be at. They weren't going to be bad this year, but maybe a 5-4, 6-3 team. They're looking every bit like a team that has the potential to go undefeated this season. So big things there for the Potters. And then I think the obvious other one is Normal Community, just for being as good as they've been. And, teams recognizing this is probably the best Normal Community team, that we've seen in 5 or 6 years. So just kind of on the big school action there, a couple teams hit the ground running really hard, and they've been really impressive.
Sure. And Joey?
Yeah, I'm with Gavin. I think Normal Community is the obvious answer. Yeah, John, I'm with Gavin. I think Normal Community is the obvious answer. You look at what they did against Sacred Heart Griffin. It's open this season. You look at what they did to Normal West, another state-ranked team at the time, and still are a state-ranked team, I believe. I'll have to pull that up. I'm a voter. I should know, but that was a I didn't mean to flex like that. Oh, man, that sounds horrible. But and then you look at what they did last week, too. Against Peoria, the Ironmen have it rolling. I think they've been impressive throughout. Olympia last week, a good performance against Williamsville, who was third in the 3A poll. Olympia will get some love this week, but Normal Community's got to be the answer. Hands down.
Yeah, I sort of think so as well. Obviously, I was going to say Normal Community as well, but I don't need to say any more about them. The results, as you said, Joey, just kind of speak for themselves. Just look at their schedule and everything. Look at those scores. That pretty says it all. If I had to pick one, I'm gonna go with small. So I'm gonna go with Tri Valley. a team that, they lost, they went to the two-way state championship. They lost their starting quarterback, running back, wide receiver, all three of which were very dynamic playmakers. They lost a lot of, guys in their defense. And you look at the heart of Illinois, which, is kind of coming more into focus, this week with, maybe some not quite as competitive matchups in the middle line in the Big 12 across the board. So this kind of our week or two to, highlight our small schools. But, the HOI small has been having, a field day with these HOI large teams. Tri-Valley, though, is, in the HOI large conference, they're still 4-0, and, they're, still kicking undefeated, and despite, a lot of, new roster pieces this year. So credit to what Josh Roop has done down there in Downs. Real quick, moving on, real quick, guys, biggest surprise, biggest team that, that is just, kind of, said, hey, much bigger or much better, I should say, than we thought.
Yeah, I'll jump in with that. I think you could go Olympia for that. We've talked a lot about them in this episode of the podcast. Spartans are getting some love, but they had some not so good seasons in the Illini Prairie Conference toward the end of their run there. They were good last year. They were a playoff team, but I think it just goes to show what the Spartans have built. They are a contender, certainly, and they're going to make some noise this year. That Williamsville win last week that we've alluded to, it's a good sign here in the middle part of the season. I think they'll be able to hang with anyone they face. Spartans, after a not so good stretch, I think are looking really good here. I don't know that it's a huge surprise, but I think it is. If you look at where they were a few years ago to now, it's a big jump.
Certainly.
I'll say Dunlap, and I know you'll like that one there, Jonathan. Dunlap definitely has been, a team that we expected to continue to be really, really good with the dueling sophomore quarterbacks. There's only one way to go, and that's up. They're going to continue to get better. But being younger and having some younger parts of this team, having some turnover from last season, maybe again expected them to have some growing pains a little bit, but they haven't shown that whatsoever. 4-0, and I will be shocked if they aren't 6-0 going into week 7. They play East Peoria and Canton. They should most likely, of course, we have to wait and see, but most likely take care of business in the next 2 weeks. And if they can continue to keep rolling, I mean, over the stretch, they beat a couple of opponents out of the Quad Cities, Rock Island and Galesburg, taking their first 2 conference victories as well. Big fashion, shutout Pekin on the road, nearly shut out Limestone in another 40-plus point effort. And again, I would expect much of the same over the next 2 weeks. So the Eagles are soaring right now, and they're flying high and looking to keep things rolling.
Yeah, Gavin kind of stole that off the tip of my tongue. I was going to say Dunlap, but I want to almost say Bloomington. They're middle of the pack right now in the Big 12. I know they've had some upside, but John, this is a game where they come into the game against Normal Community Friday night. You can't overlook Bloomington. They beat Notre Dame. They do have very potential upside on offense. They have good defense. This is a Bloomington team that's kind of been up and down for the last few seasons, but I wouldn't count them out at all. And I know Normal Community is really going to come into this game strong, but Bloomington has had their down years. They've been to the state championship back in the early 2000s. But this is a Bloomington team that's kind of rebuilding. They're finding their stride. And as Gavin's point, Dunlap, obviously the team in the middle line that could shock a lot of people, that they could go undefeated. But I would say those 2 teams, Bloomington and Dunlap.
Yeah, definitely. And, real quick, I'm going to give some more love to small schools. I had one and I thought about another. I'm going to go with 2 of them. I know we picked superlatives, but I'm going to have it shared. Fieldcrest and Bloomington Central Catholic. Starting with BCC, the Saints are 4-0, looking really good. They got big shot to beat Tolono at home this week. Which I think if I had to guess, it probably would be their first one over the Rockets, who have been a traditionally strong program in quite some time. So the pathway is there for them to win the Illini Prairie, go 8-1, maybe 9-0. Who knows? Colin Hayes is doing a great job at quarterback and all over the field. For the Saints, and then Fieldcrest as well, coming off, an 0-9 season. Hadn't really won, since 2021. I think they only won 1 game that year as well. They're already at 2 so far. You got definitely some opportunities for them in order to, win more as the season goes along. Who knows? Knights could even, go from 0-9 into the playoffs this year. So I think that's a big team to watch, a little bit east of, Peoria and north of Normal. So real quick, guys, we have a couple minutes left, but just give me just your brief answers, nothing more than your answer on this one. Most likely to go undefeated the rest of the way.
I mean, there's some obvious answers here. I don't know which obvious answer I want to go with. I'll take Washington, I suppose. So, you know, the Panthers are looking fantastic, and a lot of people, a lot of media outlets, a lot of us here at Clutch Sports, think there's potential for them to possibly, make a trip to the state finals. If they're playing state final football, I don't think that would come as a surprise to anybody. They're a complete team. They're a team that has a lot of experience from last year. Daryl Crouch, of course, the great coach he is, has been enhanced this season, being his last year. So Washington certainly is one of the teams for sure.
Certainly. And Joey.
Going to me. Man, I wanted to pull up Morton's schedule in front of me, but they do play Washington and Dunlap. That's tough. Washington, yeah, I'm not going to go with Morton. I think Morton's a very good team. They've earned their success this season. I don't think they'll go undefeated. Those are two tough ones. I got to go Normal Community. They've got some tough ones behind them. They've looked good. John said keep an eye on the Bloomington game this week. Certainly any given Friday, right? But I think they've gotten through Peoria. They've gotten through a reigning state champion in SHG. And the Cyclones, by the way, have looked very good since that week 1 loss. I think you got to give it to the Ironmen. Strong track record, and they've earned what's come their way.
Yeah, I will say that Morton's probably the most dominant team in the Mid-Atlantic. If they can beat a tough Washington team, and then I'll agree with Joey right there in the Big 12 Normal Community. It's really hard to count them out. They beat SHG Peoria High handedly by 30-plus points. I would give it to Normal Community as well. If Morton can beat Washington, Dunlap, all roads lead to head to a state playoff run.
Real quick, John, I want to throw it to the Illini Prairie Conference real quick. A team in Champaign that's really tearing it up, St. Joseph Ogden. I know well beyond our scope here with Clutch Sports Media, but
a little close to the state line for us.
A little bit close to Indiana, about 40 minutes away from the border there. But the Spartans looking really good. That's a team in the 3A class. It's going to make, I think, a lot of noise. I don't see them losing. Of course, any given Friday, the IPC is so deep. So, I mean, you never really know. They'll have to go through BCC as the season draws to a close. But keep an eye on the Spartans. I just want to put that on the record right now at the halfway mark. I think the Spartans are legit this year. Both two Spartans are legit.
Definitely. And, obviously, I'm sure people watching this podcast, probably not many St. Joseph Ogden fans watching, but if your team's in 3A, like, for example, Olympia, Eureka, teams like that, that's SJO is not a team that you're going to want to face. Real quick, I'm going to go with Peoria High. I know they're 2-2 right now, but I think they're, their most, I'd say their hardest games are behind them. They got Richwoods, or they have Manual, Richwoods, and then Bloomington, Normal West, P&E the rest of the way. Those last 3 games, I think, could be close if Peoria High trips up a little bit, but I don't foresee them doing so. I think they'll end the year 7-2, at least in my opinion. So, guys, real quick, we only have a couple minutes left. We're going to skip over Player of the Year for right now, unfortunately. We can give those out on our social media channels, but real quick, I want to touch on the games we're broadcasting. We'll be at Morton and Pekin in our WMBD Game of the Week on ciproud.com. That game kicks off at 7:30, and we'll have DMAC and Eureka in our CSM Game of the Week, kicking off at 7 p.m. on clutchsportsil.com and our YouTube channel. Gavin, we'll quickly go to you. DMAC and Eureka, what are you expecting?
Yeah, DMAC and Eureka is a great rivalry game, although if you looked into DMAC at all, you may notice, hey, they're 2-2. Maybe thought they were going to get back to a little bit of a stronger team this year. Well, they've been plagued by some injuries. Some of their top guys have already gone out for a couple of weeks now. They're not expected to miss the rest of the season, but Brent Denniston, Tice Albert, and a couple of their big names that they've been out with the last couple of weeks. And Cody Meyer said it's just been really up and down season, but their guys keep battling. And this game will certainly be a battle. If you like good small school football that's a battle, this is the game for you. So tune in, great small school action from Eureka on Friday night.
Should be it for Eureka. I know, Gavin, the Hornets have looked pretty good this year, and they lost to a good Shelbyville team back in week 2. They're 2-2 on the year again. Sort of almost a surprising loss to Gibson City Melvin Sibley, who by the way used to be a couple years ago, they were extremely good. I think they're kind of getting back to that point now. So certainly not the end of the world for them. But as Joey was doing his
Flapping my wing. Yeah,
he was flapping his falcon wings there.
Falcon,
But again,
yeah.
I think now he's making
What
falcon.
sound does a falcon make?
I don't know. Probably close to what you just made. I will say that. But I think the Hornets will be since we're making mascot noises apparently. They're running back Mason Bowles has been great. Quarterback Dawson Dorn, came in the season with some questions. He's been performing well. So we'll have to see, again, how the Hornets can bounce back. They've been looking good this year as well. I'll be at Morton Pekin, real quick again. Morton, I think, is going to be a team. I think the key for that game for both teams is going to be, how good are you going to stop the run? So what, Doug Nutter says is going to be big for them. For both teams, obviously the Dragons, they have to stop Sean and Buffington, Brett Michael, no easy task. And, for Morton, obviously, they have to stop, Pekin's offensive attack, which is going to rely a little bit more on the ground. They have a new guy, Connor Martin and some other guys that'll carry the ball a lot, but, I wouldn't expect the Dragons to pass it a ton, although you never know. We'll just kind of see what kind of game, transpires. Maybe if, the Dragons go down, maybe they'll see, air it out a bit more, and everything, but it should be a good game. Pekin, I think is a better team than most people expect. They played a really tough schedule. They beat Rolling Meadows in week 1. They lost to a very good Belleville East team. They're receiving votes in Class 8A. And they played, Dunlap and Washington, who are two of some of the favorites in the Mid-Illini. So, don't cut out the Dragons yet. I think, I think they're a big bounce back candidate this week against Morton. So, any you guys have any thoughts about Pekin Morton before we quickly wrap up here?
Yeah, John.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead. All right, John, to your point, I think Pekin, losing a big chunk of that team last year, a lot of seniors, that was a state caliber team. The defense has always been there for Pekin under Coach Doug Nutter. I think they put up a little bit of fight against Morton. I don't think we see that same type of dominant run game against Metamora that Morton put up with 283 yards on the ground with Sean and Buffington. I think Pekin can hang close in this game in the first half. And I honestly think they could kind of keep it late or close late in this game. But Pekin is not a team that you can count out in the middle line. I know they lost a lot of guys, but this is a team that is experienced under Coach Doug Nutter. And I would not be surprised if there's some type of upset brewing. I'm not going to say that, but it could happen.
Certainly could, and should be two great games to watch. We'll have them both for you this coming Friday on CI Proud. Again, Morton Pekin and ClutchSportsIL.com between DMAC and Eureka. That about does it for this episode of the In the Clutch podcast. We'll talk to you next week. My co-hosts Gavin Russell, John Komosa, and Joey Wright. I'm Jonathan Michael saying so long, and see you on Friday night. Should be a good one.